Okay, we're going to be talking about Tekton a little bit today, primarily about open source application, other open source products, very high level. We're going to start out with Tekton. It's a great product. We use it heavily. It's what we started with, and I can't recommend it enough. I mean, obviously open source is somewhat controversial, right? I mean, there's a lot of risk and reward to it. I think as an industry, we haven't quite adopted open source to where we need to be. So this is going to mostly be a pro open source talk, going over things that are pretty well known at this point, but I still want to bring them up. Specifically for CDF, though, Tekton is a wonderful product and one of the best open source products I've used personally. So just to start, what are some of the benefits here? Like for us, faster development and easier prototyping. We had a prototype based off Tekton pipelines in 4 days. We already had the UI pretty well fleshed out, but we didn't have a great backend engine. We had an API, but we didn't really have a core engine for running the workflows that we were wanting to build. We had started with something that actually took longer than just trying Tekton and just prototyping with Tekton. We heard about Tekton originally at KubeCon. Seemed like a great product, so we tried it out. So this is basically built over a long weekend. Not that that's recommended, but engineers, what are you gonna do, right? So we had a fully functional workflow engine built off this. So it was able to create a Kubernetes cluster with Terraform, updated the cluster using kubectl, pulled down private source code with GitHub, built the corresponding Docker images using Conoco, pushed Docker images to GCR, deployed the Docker images to the cluster using Helm. It did basically an end-to-end full, like we want to deploy a example product with this. Our workflow engine was able to do that based off Tekton. Part of that is because it integrates easily with Kubernetes containers for step processing. It's a great model. The way they set up the pipelines and steps, it's a fantastic piece of technology, very easy to use, has great examples, great documentation. You can get it up easily in an hour if you want to try it out, basically an hour or less with some of their simple examples. It's based on modern controller CRD technology, which I highly recommend. Our product is as well. That's sort of an emerging thing that people should be using. And there's the controller runtime, which is a really nice introduction into building your own controllers, and we'll talk about that later. I also just like to shout out the reliability of Tekton. Performs very well under load. We've never had a problem with it, no matter how much burst or sustained traffic we send to it. And I would say it's heavily tested at this point. We've certainly heavily tested it, and there's enough of a community out there. I think that it's going to be very reliable. Just talking about then just generic open source technology a bit. In general, benefits here. Reduces the development time needed to build your core functionality. Reduces offloads maintenance of lower level functionality, right? I mean, we don't need to be reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. We have a smaller team. We don't want to be building everything from scratch. We want to focus on higher level functionality and try to bring a unique or experimental product to the market as fast as possible. That it fits well with agile, you're right, getting things out the door. Also, just as part of the maintenance, defects are found and fixed faster. We don't have to worry about that with products like Tekton. Now, this does require high levels of community and user engagement to reap the real benefits of it. Otherwise, it can be the inverse. You can have a harder time getting things fixed. But the more we, as a community, industry, embrace open source, the better this will all get. This lets us all contribute new technology to the industry rather than redoing the same things internally over and over again. And it is kind of avoids this sort of, I can do this slightly better mentality. We're all prone to that, I think. And that, in a lot of cases, that's true, but it's better to have a robust core community product that gets a lot of feedback, a lot of users engaged with, a lot of PRs, a lot of fixes, to fix those things rather than try to rebuild them. Right? We're not going to get anywhere if we just keep internally in our own organizations redoing the same technology over and over again. Some things to look for when you're choosing open source technology. Community engagement is the biggest thing, right? High number of contributors, frequent contributions, healthy PR activity. When we're looking at PRs, right, we want to see high turnover, a lot of PRs being open, a lot of PRs being closed. Now, whether they're open for long periods of time, that's going to be different, right? You can't have a metric on that per se. Sometimes it being left open for quality contributions longer is better. Anyway, but just ensure that there's healthy PR activity. Constant updates obviously are really good. Frequent release is always good. The big key thing for me though is up-to-date dependencies. Right, the only time we've had problem with open source is when we're using things that just don't keep up to date, and then there's all kinds of dependency conflicts to resolve, and that gets a bit messy. Good examples in documentation, right, as well. Tekton does a fantastic job of that. Here's some of just the open source technology that we've used and that I highly recommend. So obviously Tekton pipelines is fantastic. Knative serving, another great tool. We use that for our webhook processing. That's been phenomenal. We use DataWire's Ambassador connected to Knative serving as well. Open telemetry is a great tool for metrics. It's a great standard. Look into that if you haven't. And then just the controller runtime as part of Kubernetes. That we're basing our controller processing on that. There are other ones, but it's a good solid one to use, especially if you're just getting started out. Thank you. Our team is Relay. We have quite a few open source repositories out there. We love contributions and any community engagement there. You can see the links below. Appreciate it. Thank you.